You already knew something was wrong. You felt it in your body before you could explain it in your mind. That sick drop in your stomach, that tension in your chest, that moment when the evidence was there, the lie was obvious, and you looked at them expecting honesty, remorse, or at least some sign of human accountability, but instead saw something cold, guarded, and calculating. You saw the moment they knew you knew, and instead of the truth, you got a performance. Instead of accountability, you got a war. If you have ever walked away from a conversation knowing you were right, but somehow feeling crazy, this is for you. Stay with me because this is language for something you lived but may never have fully named. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Here's what many people do not understand about narcissists and guilt. They do feel the threat of being exposed. Not guilt in the healthy sense, not as a moral signal that says, I did wrong and I need to repair it, but they do feel the pressure of being caught. And in the narcissistic mind, guilt is not a call to make things right. It is danger. It is exposure. It is a crack in the image they work so hard to protect. So when they realize you have found that crack, their system activates. What you witnessed was not simple confusion or clumsy dishonesty. It was a defense structure coming online because the question in their mind is not, how do I repair this? It is, how do I make this disappear? The first move is denial. Not ordinary denial, not confusion or faulty memory, total denial. You had the screenshots, the timeline, the witnesses, the receipts, the facts, and they still looked at you and said, no, that never happened. You are imagining things. You are making that up. And what made it so disorienting was that the denial was not just about the event. It was about your reality, your perception, your sanity. When a narcissist denies something, it's obviously true. They are not trying to discover the truth. They are trying to force you into defending your reality so that the focus shifts away from what they did. Suddenly, you are no longer discussing their behavior. You are arguing over basic facts. You are explaining the sky is blue. And while you scramble to prove what happened, accountability slips out the back door. Then comes blame shifting. The moment denial stops working, the spotlight moves to you. Not the lie, not the betrayal, not the harm. You. Your tone was too harsh. Your reaction was too emotional. They lied because you were too controlling, too distant, too demanding, too cold, too needy. Somehow, the reason they hurt you becomes your personality, your weakness, your history, your failure. This is how blame shifting works. If they can redirect the conversation toward your flaws, they no longer have to sit in their own behavior. The emotional burden moves from the guilty person to the wounded person. And here is why that worked on you. Not because you were weak, because you had a conscience. Because when someone pointed out something you could have done better, you actually considered it. You reflected. You wondered if there was truth in it. A narcissist uses that against you. Your integrity became their escape hatch. Your willingness to grow became the ladder they used to climb out of accountability. There is also the historical audit. You confront them about one specific issue, and suddenly every mistake you ever made is dragged into the room. Something from 3 years ago, a time you raised your voice, a moment you were late, a season when you were struggling. The point is not fairness. The point is overload. They bury the current truth under so many accusations that you lose sight of the original issue. You came in with one clear point and they turned it into a flood. And when you are trying to stay afloat, you cannot hold on to the truth you came to defend. Then comes rage. And this is important. Narcissistic rage, when they know they are guilty, is not just emotional overflow. It is often a tactic. It may feel explosive, chaotic, and unpredictable. But underneath it is a message. If you keep going, this will get worse for you. The rage says pursuing accountability will cost you. It is intimidation disguised as emotion. It teaches you that asking questions leads to pain, that confronting harm leads to escalation, that truth is dangerous territory. Over time, many people in these relationships stop bringing things up before the conversation even begins. They censor themselves, they minimize, they tell themselves it is not worth it. That is not weakness. That is conditioning. When rage keeps meeting truth, your nervous system learns that silence feels safer. That is exactly what the rage was designed to teach. And if rage does not shut you down, victimhood often arrives next. Suddenly, the person who hurt you is crying. Suddenly, they are talking. about their pain, their trauma, their childhood, their wounds, their stress, their loneliness. Suddenly, you are staring at someone who appears deeply hurt by your attempt to hold them accountable. And because you are empathic, because you do not want to cause pain, part of you turns toward them. That is what empathy does. It responds to suffering. This is why victim playing is so effective. It takes your legitimate pain and pushes it to the edge of the room while theirs takes center stage. You came in to address what they did, and now you are comforting the person who harmed you. That inversion is not accidental. It is one of the most powerful ways a narcissist escapes accountability. It turns the wounded person into the aggressor and the guilty person into the victim. Now we need to talk about gaslighting, because denial may be the opening move and blame shifting may be the middle game, but gaslighting is the long game. Gaslighting is not just one conversation, it is a pattern that slowly erodes your trust in your own mind. It is the repeated suggestion that you exaggerate, misread, misremember, overreact, or cannot interpret reality clearly. Each comment may seem small on its own. You are too sensitive. You always twist things. I am worried because you never remember anything right. But repeated over time, those comments create self-doubt. They train you to hesitate when your instincts are trying to protect you. That is why you questioned yourself even when you were right. That is why you replayed conversations for hours. That is why you asked other people what they thought and then immediately doubted your own version of events. You were not naturally confused. You were systematically trained not to trust yourself. The confusion was cultivated. The self-doubt was installed, and when the bigger truths finally surfaced, that groundwork made it harder for you to stand firmly in what you knew. Then comes the charm offensive. After the denial, the blame shifting, the rage, the tears, and the confusion, they become kind again, attentive again, loving again. Suddenly, they remember what matters to you. Suddenly, they speak the language you always wanted to hear. And in that moment, it can feel like the person you hoped for has returned. But in the context of guilt, that charm is not repair. It is eraser. It is designed to replace the emotional memory of harm with a new emotional impression that makes you question the seriousness of what just happened. This is why cycles are so powerful. Each return to warmth makes the previous cruelty look temporary. Each kind moment becomes evidence for the hope that maybe this time it will be different. I'm not saying that to shame you. I am saying it so you can see the pattern clearly. Hope is often what kept you there. Hope that the good moments were the real person and the harmful ones were the exception. But in a cycle like this, the return to kindness is often part of the same system that created the harm. There's another behavior that matters here, and it is one of the most strategic: the preemptive strike. Sometimes a narcissist senses that you are close to the truth, close to leaving, or close to naming the pattern. So they move first. They accuse you before you can confront them. They create conflict before you can speak. They tell other people you are unstable, harsh, selfish, dramatic, or impossible. They start building a narrative that protects them before the real story has a chance to surface. This matters because narcissists often care deeply about image, their public identity, their reputation, the story other people believe about them. All of that is precious territory. So when guilt is close to being exposed, they do not just defend themselves in private. They may start shaping the social story in advance. That is what the preemptive strike does. It protects the image before the truth can threaten it. You may have experienced this as a strange shift. They suddenly became more distant, more hostile, more accusatory, more suspicious. It felt like they were punishing you for something you had not done, and that confusion had a purpose. If they could keep you reactive, hurt, and off balance, they could keep you from becoming calm, clear, and grounded. And a clear person is much harder to control than a dysregulated one. Understanding this changes everything, because once you see these behaviors as a system, instead of isolated moments, your whole story starts to make sense. You were not too sensitive. You were not crazy. You were not impossible to please. You were inside a psychological system designed to protect someone else's image at the expense of your reality. And here is one of the hardest truths. Some of what you felt from them may have been real. Some of the tenderness, some of the charm, some of the connection may have existed in genuine form. Narcissism is not always cartoon evil. It is often a fractured personality organized around shame, image, fear, and survival. That does not excuse the manipulation. It does not soften the damage, but it may help answer the painful questions so many people carry. Was any of it real? Parts of it may have been, but what was real in them was never strong enough to protect you from the parts driven by control, self-P protection, and the terror of exposure. That is why you could love them and still be harmed by them. That is why the relationship could contain moments of apparent sincerity and still be profoundly damaging. Those truths can exist together, and learning that helps you stop tearing yourself apart, trying to decide whether everything was fake or everything was real. The better question is this: what pattern dominated the relationship when it mattered most? And if the answer is denial, blame shifting, rage, gaslighting, victim playing, charm after harm, and reputation management, then the pattern tells the truth. Because this is where your power starts to return. Not through revenge, not through winning an argument, but through clarity. Quiet, steady clarity. The kind that no longer needs the other person to agree with your reality before you trust it. The kind that knows what happened even if the person who did it never admits it. The kind that stops begging for validation from the very person committed to distorting the truth. That clarity was never absent. It was buried under noise. Their denial, their rage, their tears, their charm, their rewritten history, their constant pressure on your mind. But underneath all of it, your system was still picking up the truth. That sinking feeling, that tightening in your body, that instinct that something was wrong, that was not weakness. That was information. And now you have language for it. You know what denial with conviction is doing. You know what blame shifting is designed to accomplish. You know what rage is communicating beneath the volume. You know what victim playing steals from you. You know what gaslighting is meant to destroy. You know what charm after harm is trying to erase. You know what the preemptive strike is building. Once you have that map, you're no longer wandering in the dark. The pain may not disappear right away. The memories may still come back at night or in quiet moments when your guard is down. Healing is not instant, but understanding gives you a framework that honors your experience. It gives you something solid to return to when old doubts resurface. Instead of being pulled back into their story, you can say, I know what happened. I know how this worked. I know what these tactics were meant to do, and they do not define reality anymore. That is real power, not the power of someone who has never hurt. The power of someone who was hurt, searched for truth, found it, and decided not to abandon themselves again. That is what you are building every time you choose understanding over self-betrayal. The EY, narcissist who knows they are guilty depends on one thing above all else. They depend on the hope that the cost of pursuing truth will become too high for you, that the exhaustion, confusion, fear, and self-doubt will wear you down until false peace feels easier than honest reality. They count on you deciding it is easier to bury your truth than keep fighting to protect it. But you are still here. You are still asking questions. You are still searching for understanding, and that means the most important thing they were counting on has not happened. You have not given up on yourself, because the moment you stop asking what is wrong with me and start asking what is the pattern, something shifts. Something irreversible. You stop carrying what was never yours to carry. You stop measuring yourself by a story written to protect someone else's ego. You begin returning to the part of you that knew before you had words. The part that noticed, the part that felt the warning, the part that was never actually broken, only overwhelmed. The narcissists knew they were guilty, they knew, and they used denial, blame shifting, rage, victimhood, gaslighting, charm, and narrative control to keep that guilt from costing them what it should have. But what their system was never built to withstand is your understanding, your willingness to see the pattern clearly, your decision to stop participating in your own confusion. You became dangerous to that system the moment you started learning how it works. And even if your clarity still feels new, even if it still shakes on hard days, it is growing quietly, steadily. Every time you name the tactic, every time you trust your perception, every time you choose not to explain away what hurt you, every time you return to yourself, one day you will notice something has changed. Not with drama, not with fanfare, but with a deep internal settling. You will realize you trust yourself again. You will realize that the voice inside you that says something is wrong is no longer the voice you argue with, but the voice you listen to. That is where healing is taking you back to yourself.